And we begin this Sunday morning with President Trump's efforts to help end 2 wars in this, his 4th week in office. And ahead of tomorrow, day 500 of the Israeli hostages in captivity in Gaza. Hamas this weekend released 3 more Israeli hostages, including the last living Israeli American, after the terrorist group initially said it would postpone the release, claiming that Israel violated the terms of the ceasefire agreement. The reversal coming after President Trump threatened Hamas that if all the remaining hostages were not released by 12 p.m. yesterday, quote, all hell is going to break out. The first phase of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas set to end this month, with little known about any progress on the terms of the second phase. That phase was supposed to bring the return of all hostages in exchange for the release of a total of 1,700 Palestinian prisoners who committed real crimes, as well as Israel's withdrawal from Gaza and a permanent ceasefire. The bulk of the progress in the release of the hostages so far happening in just the last 3 months, after U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, traveled to Israel, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar to meet with mediators in this conflict, drawing up plans to end the war on Israel and release all hostages. And reports this morning that Witkoff is now planning to join other Trump officials to begin efforts to end the war between Russia and Ukraine, with talks expected to take place in Saudi Arabia this week. Joining me now in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is the man himself, U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. Steve, thank you so much for all of your efforts, all that you have done, and thank you for joining us right now.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Maria. Thank you.
Before we get to Israel and Hamas, let me get your take on your plans in Saudi Arabia. Are you expecting to leave for Saudi tonight? And what specifically are you hoping to accomplish?
Well, I don't want to talk too much about that specifically, Maria, but I am going tonight. I'll be traveling there with the National Security Advisor, and we'll be having meetings at the direction of the president, and hopefully we'll make some really good progress with regard to Russia, Ukraine.
Is there anything you can say about some of your allies alarmed by the fact that Ukraine is not part of the talks?
Well, I think Ukraine is part of the talks. The president had their president, Zelensky, on the phone this past week. I am pretty sure that a lot of our cabinet people, including Treasury Secretary Bessent, the Vice President, Mike Waltz, John Radcliffe, our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, have been meeting with various Ukrainian people at the Munich Security Conference. So I don't think this is about excluding anybody. In fact, it's about including everybody.
And final question on this. Do you expect Ukraine will have to give up a significant portion of its land? And do we believe that, if so, Putin will be done after this?
You know, those are details, and I'm not dismissive of the details. They're important. But I think the beginning here is trust building. It's getting everybody to understand that this war does not belong continuing, that it should end. That's what the president has directed us to do, to negotiate a proper ending of this war. No more death. There's been too much already. That's what he said. And that's the direction, and that's what we're going to do.
Let me move on to Israel. You've done such an incredible job in terms of getting some of these hostages home. Tomorrow is the 500th day that the hostages have been in captivity. Will there be a phase 2? Have the terms been drawn up there?
Well, phase 2, Maria, phase 2 is a little bit more complicated than phase 1. But phase 2 is absolutely going to begin. I've actually had calls this morning, I can tell you, with Prime Minister Netanyahu, with Prime Minister Mohammed from Qatar, and as well with Director Hassan from Egypt, who is their Director of Intelligence. And we had very, very productive and constructive calls this morning about the sequencing of phase 2, setting forth positions on both sides so we can understand where we level set where we are today, and then continuing talks this week at a location to be determined so that we can figure out how we get to the end of phase 2 successfully.
Do you expect phase two to include the release of all of the hostages? And Steve, how many of those hostages do you believe are still alive?
Well, phase two includes 19 IDF soldiers. We believe all of them are alive, and some others too as well. It includes Edon Alexander, who of course we've been pressing for because he is an American and Israeli citizen as well. So it includes all of these people. It also includes getting families back, the bodies of members of their family who have died, so that they can properly be able to mourn for them today and in the future. So it includes all of those people. It just is a little bit more intricate and complicated in terms of how we bring the two sides together on this, because phase two contemplates an end of the war, but it also contemplates Hamas not being involved in the government and being gone from Gaza. So we've got to square those two things.
Steve, you are the first American official to visit Gaza. Can you share with us a little of what you have witnessed? I mean, it must be mentioned the fact that, 1,700 Palestinian prisoners are expected to be released, some of whom have committed serious crimes, tried to commit terrorism on the world, and they're being released. The people who were being released and the hostages in Gaza were going about their lives at a concert. Can you tell us a bit about what you witnessed, including seeing some of those caves and tunnels?
Sure. Well, so Maria, I felt it was important for me to go to Gaza. And why? Because phase one, the execution of phase one was an accomplishment. It brought a lot of people together who needed to work hard to get that accomplished. But what was always going to be more complicated was the implementation of phase one, which meant the Netzarim line, the Philadelphia corridor, how people are crossing, how they were going to be, how security procedures would be instituted. And a small little blow-up on phase one could have ended all of phase one. So we so far have been able to successfully navigate that. And I felt that there was no way to navigate it unless somebody was actually on premises in Gaza. What I saw there was alarming. It's completely devastated. And that begs the question, should people be allowed in there in those sorts of dangerous conditions? Thank God we've had no incidents, but there's 30,000 unexploded shells throughout Gaza. And the buildings are all down. It's utter destruction. There's all kinds of issues. This affects, by the way, phase three, which is the theoretical reconstruction of Gaza. We're going to have to get to a reconstruction, but the devil will be in the details on the master plan, on how we examine everything subterranean, which has been blown up. So lots of issues with that. With all of that said, I also saw a film of what happened on October 7th, and that was a horrific film. So I've got some context, and that was important for me to have.
And given those 30,000, I mean, all of the shells that were unexploded, you've said that this area is uninhabitable. And President Trump has said that you just can't go back there. You would never send your children there, knowing that you've got all these potential shells that could explode. As a result, President Trump said that the U.S. will own Gaza. You've had some pushback from some regional leaders there. I guess Egypt is coming up with its own plan. But from your background as a real estate professional, give us your sense of why you believe that is, in fact, a viable result.
Well, let me say this, Maria. First of all, as usual, the president comes out, says something new and unique. He gets attacked for it. By the way, that happens when new and unique proposals come to the fore. But it also encouraged a lot of conversation. So now we have the Egyptians saying we have a plan. The Jordanians are saying we have a plan. And people are actually engaging in really important, cogent discussion about what ought to happen there. The president, first and foremost, and he's a real estate person by training too, and I went into the business because of him. He inspired me. Who wouldn't want to be like Donald Trump? So, but the president's position is, why are we going to necessarily default to a policy prescription that has been, where the same policy prescription has been implemented for the last 4 or 5 decades, and it hasn't worked. So maybe we need to explore new policy prescriptions that ultimately end up in a better life for Gazans and Palestinians. And I think it's as simple as that. And it's very, very sensible. For some reason, people have a problem with him saying things like that, but he doesn't for all the right reasons. Look at the discourse that's now happening today. We're actually engaging in a productive conversation around what is best for Gaza and how do we make people's lives better. And I think that's a better program.
And of course, President Trump spoke with the King of Jordan, who did agree to accept sick children, but the others, and largely all of the regional partners, said that they really do not want to accept those people who are living in Gaza right now.
Well, we've talked, I think Gaza is a really rough place to go back to. I think that families going back there thinking that there's an easy reconstruction process, that they've been on some level deceived. And I think that's part of President Trump's message, that we don't want people going back there being injured, being hurt, God forbid being killed because a building falls down on them inadvertently, or God forbid a child playing in the streets touches an unexploded munition and it explodes, and he loses his hands or his arms or any one of these terrible things that could happen. That's kind of the point. And I think that the president's solution is, how do we address where 2 million people can go? And I think the obvious answers are, in some respects, Egypt, in some respects, Jordan, but in some respects, other countries who have called us up and voluntarily said, this is a humanitarian effort. We want to help you. We want to participate in this humanitarian effort. And I think that's to be commended.
And of course, President Trump has put, once again, maximum pressure on Iran. What is the situation in terms of Iran, and how can you make a dent in stopping Iran from supporting these proxies like Hamas?
Well, that's the ultimate question, Maria, and that's what we've got to answer. All roads lead to Iran in this Middle Eastern conflict. What happened? The Houthis, the Hezbollah, Hamas, they're all sponsored by Iran, and Iran is the benefactor. But of course, the largest issue is the nuclear, and the president has said they will not get a bomb. Them getting a bomb is devastating to the region. It will force every other country in that region to get a bomb too. We'll have a nuclear arms race, and that simply can't happen. But the president has also said this can be solved diplomatically. And if Iran shows an interest in solving it diplomatically, the American government remains open to those discussions. And so I hope that it can be solved diplomatically, because the alternative is not such a good alternative.
Steve, there was gunfire this morning near Gaza. Has the ceasefire ended? Is there anything we need to be aware of in terms of where we stand today with this ceasefire agreement?
Well, I'm not aware of the gunfire, Maria. Now that you're telling it to me, I'll ask the question. But I think the ceasefire is holding. I think we are in discussions about how to finish the next hostage release, and there'll be an Israeli delegation going to either Doha or Cairo. And so I think that the ceasefire is holding. There could have been a circumstance of shooting, but hopefully it's not big enough to have changed this situation on the ground. I think we're stable, and things are where they are supposed to be.
Steve, again, thank you so much for all of your efforts. We'll be watching your work in Saudi Arabia as your efforts continue now toward Ukraine. We appreciate your time, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
All right, Steve Witkoff joining us today, and a special envoy to the Middle East.